here's my contribution for the golden nugget of the day, right? Is to realize that there are a lot of things you can do to improve your health span specifically, that heretofore weren't known, and you can go online and it'll be kind of hit or miss to see if you're gonna, find out about them, because you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I'm hopeful that the book will help at least start you on that journey to take control of your own health. There are a lot of things we can do to help you be the arbiter of your own health, and that's the main message. Take control. You don't have to sit there and go, oh geez, I drank and smoked half my life away. I can't tell you how many people, for example, come in and say, oh boy, if you knew what I did in college or up until I got sober, whatever, man. Okay, now's now. And even, oh God, I did so many anabolic steroids, I ruined myself. I don't know where that comes from. Anyway, I'm again. I started with a nugget. Now I'm giving you,
All right, Battle Plan. Craig Capurso here, your host of the My Battle Plan podcast, and we have a great guest today, Dr. Rand McClain. He's got a book that's coming out, Cheating Death. I got to give him a plug, man. This thing's we just kind of sat and ripped for about an hour and a half. So hopefully you got a little time, get a coffee, sit back and relax, because this thing's going to be pretty good. Take some notes, though. He drops a lot of lines. He does a little bit more science than we usually do on this podcast, but we'll make sure that we stack the notes inside of wherever you're watching this, whether it's a YouTube or if it's on one of the podcast players. We'll make sure the show notes are loaded for you. But without further ado, let's get into this episode with Dr. Rand McClain, and we're going to be cheating death today. Well, folks, we got Dr. Rand McClain on here, and he's got a beautiful picture of this book in the background called, say, Cheating Death, and is the new book that's coming out right now. And I just saw Dr. Rand, and how would you like me to call you? Are you Dr. Rand or Doc? What's good for you so the audience can know what we're going to call you as well?
Rand is fine.
Rand, all right, Rand, I love it. So you just already hit the Barnes and Noble's bestseller. Talk to me about that, because I was just a part of a campaign. It wasn't my book, but I was with a guy called Coach Burt, Michael Burt, and he had just ran his. He did Flip the Switch, and his was supposed to come out. There was a whole catastrophe that came out with it, but I am actually very well aware of how bestsellers work. We worked with brand builders, Rory Vaden, and those guys to get his book out, so I could see what you're doing with yours. But you already hit the bestsellers on Barnes and Nobles, and it comes out when?
March 7th.
March 7th.
It's when it's officially released. But yeah, as you know, they do the whole thing with pre-sales,
Yep.
and this is not my bailiwick. And we started off the conversation maybe before we recorded, but I'm the first one if I don't know what I'm doing, man, why do I try and fake it? So
Yeah.
I hired a firm, TGC Worldwide,
Okay.
because this was not to give you more information than you want, but this whole thing started with, the third day in March, during COVID, and having a few beers and getting sunburned by 1 o'clock and going, okay, this is not happening. Let's do something productive with my time here. Not that having an occasional beer in the sun doesn't help you every once in a while, but I got the idea of writing the book, but I had no idea, how to do it. So I asked around through really some guys involved in my supplement company, and one thing led to another. I got an agent and a publisher, and then I guess you call them PR people, but
Yep.
they know what to do with books, and that's how I have to give the credit to Charlie Fusco and Laura Whitlocks, who are well, Charlie's the principal, but I think Laura's first in or second in command. She's the right hand or something like that.
Yeah.
But I give them the credit. I don't know how to do this stuff.
I love it. And that's the honest truth. Most of us don't, right? Especially when you see these people. If you're not just like a superstar with like the following that just basically does anything you ask him to do, you have to, there's a gamification element to this. Like, you have to play the game that works, and it's weekly increments. But not to bore the audience with all that stuff, but I know it's probably pretty interesting to you because you're going through it and you're about to launch. So
it's interesting, but it's also applicable maybe to your audience, because and not to name names, but you see some people that have a name and and I'm careful not to name names because it's not to be a jerk, but I mean, there's some stuff that then they get into, and it's not their main field.
yeah.
But they have a name, and then they start talking about stuff they don't know, and it can be a disaster. And then, you have a lot of people out there that write some great stuff. Some guys I interviewed that really have some important stuff to say. For example, Dr. Cami, who talks about the importance of dental health, and somehow we separate dental doctoring with the rest of doctoring. It's like, what? We got foot doctors. Why can't we have mouth doctors? And how important it is to medicine is huge. And yet, it's a whole separate thing. And he didn't get probably as much as he deserves in terms of accolades and understanding. And so you can call it, there's the game part of it, but there's also the practical part where these people who are writing good things and have knowledge need to have a vehicle. And that's why, I made the presumption that what I was going to be presenting here was necessary knowledge. Forgive me if people don't agree, but so I figure, okay, I got to do this the right way, and you have to call it a game or not. It's the way it's done, right?
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into a couple different segues here, and hopefully we have enough time to cover it all, and maybe we'll do another episode. But I had got contacted by one of your people, and they wanted to kind of do some promotion cycle for my audience and everything, and they just, I think they just wanted to shout him out. So you got to tell them. I was like, I think you get the podcast tours a little bit better. So she wanted to give me a book and promote it and all the other stuff, and I was like, how about this? I was like, I'll buy the book. And just like, I hope this audience does. And we're going to tell you exactly where to go. You're going to go to cheatingdeath.com is where you want to go to buy this book. And he's got some cool bonuses. So I definitely want to plug the book, guys, because this is all matters on the first week of the launch. So it's pretty important that you hear this and you take action so we can make sure that this guy gets his bestseller, because those campaigns are hard. And I know he paid up for it, and he doesn't make a whole lot of money from those in the beginning. I know how it works. So I want to push him out there. And he's got some cool bonuses called the Death Clock and Beyond Genetics. And I want to bring those up afterwards. But moral of the story is I wanted to, have an interview with you, seeing you on the Mind Pump Guys podcast, and, just watching you from the years of different things in genetics as well as hormones. And I think we're going to get into that today, gentlemen. Whoever's listening, we're going to get into that. I had some questions about testosterone, taking HRT, and then the effects of basically having your sperm count either go down or kind of the myths of that. So I think we got a really good episode, but I want to start with this because Battle Plan is faith, fitness, fellowship, and finances. Like we cover it all. And as much as I would love to just shout all your success, I want to know the struggles, because what I'm looking at right now and some of the things that I took out of this is you were the fastest promoted to senior accountant in Deloitte's history. So an accounting firm, is that correct? You were in accounting before, so you scaled that real fast. You had a small stint as a professional kickboxer in Argentina, so you're gonna tell us about that. And then you got accepted to medical school at 37, and said it was nearly impossible. And I also read some of the book already. That they were not kind enough to give me a manuscript. And they showed in his whole introduction is him talking about how he's like broken and beat up and all this other stuff, and that he's trying to get his, his medical license and all these things. But it was just amazing to see like how beat up your body was when you were going through this, and then afterwards, becoming the person that you are today. So give me a little bit of that background of like how you came up. Like, we'll get to the success stuff afterwards, but talk to me about that career. Like why did you jump from those things and do all that? Because I have similar chaos in my resume as well, we'll call
it. Some struggles, yeah. Well, from struggle comes success in a lot of ways. Well, not always. There's plenty of failures that are catastrophic and tragic, but I think any successful person will have several stories, not just a few of loss before they got success.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I have to smile because fastest ever promoted, that lasted for about 3 weeks when one of my compadres at Deloitte then succeeded me in beating the record. But I did hold it for the whole 3 weeks. But what spurred it was I found out I was going to become a dad, and I tell people this is my 9th career. Not just odd job, seriously career. And part of that's due to my, I got ADHD, and you can blame it on that. I can't focus long enough, or I couldn't back then. Maybe I was just also involved in the things that didn't interest me. I got into accounting when, I was in college and still playing sports and trying to become a pro athlete. Well, let me just do what Dad did. Dad was, doing great at it. It wasn't my cup of tea. And anyway, I found out I was going to be a dad. I said, I got to settle into something, okay, that I'm going to stick with here, because now I got somebody else. I can't just live in a mango tree and say I'm happy, or fish lobster out of the bay and sell it for $4 a tail back then. So I thought about it. I can remember it very clearly. I was on a drive across country on I-10. I said, what do you really want to do? Quit. Don't baloney yourself. This is it, dude. And it seemed daunting, but also motivational. And that's part of it, probably your personality too. Tell me I can't do it, right? It has some I always say what stubbornness is, making sure you get what you deserve. And so it can work for you or against you.
Yeah.
And I figured, hey man, if there's one thing I got is some tenacity here, and I really think I want to do this. Not think I knew I wanted to do it, and that's what got it started. And then I had a lot of setbacks, which turning a potential negative into a positive. I say to everyone, I think it helped me in my career. And going to college, medical college at 37 gives you a different perspective, no doubt about it. For better or for worse, it's a different one.
Yeah.
I believe I paid attention more to the things I thought were going to be of interest. And certainly having gone through it on a patient side at 37, when you've had probably, by then I probably had about 20 surgeries by then. You have a better feel for what the process is like and what the important things are versus not.
Yeah.
And how to maybe even just how to deal with people better. So I think that's helped me because I've had to fix a lot of things for myself. And not that you were painting me out to be a sad sack at all, but look, none of that stuff, well, clearly it didn't stop me. And I don't mean to say like that anything but motivationally to anyone who's listening. Not like I'm a superhero or anything like that. It's just, as a matter of fact, there's inspiration and desperation involved in a lot of that. But passion drives you. It was hard. There's no doubt about it. I'm not taking away. I slept in my car. I was a single dad. But I also loved it. It's like a heavy leg day, right? Where you're like,
Yeah.
man, this is hard. I'm loving it. So I'm not whining at all. And here we are.
Good, good. And look, I think this is very, pointing to the crowd that we're talking to. My obvious audience is, I would say men 30, 35 and older, some version of that for the most part. Obviously there's, people that fall outside that, first standard deviation, we'll call it. But they probably are in their position where they're like actually in the second half of life. So I'm writing a book right now. I actually was using a ghostwriter and they sent it back after obviously miles and hours of us just talking back and forth to get my voice right. And they came back with it. I'm like, oh, doesn't sound like me at all. So now I'm like scrapping the ideas and doing a little bit something different. So we're changing it. But my thought was like maybe even writing a book called The Second Half, because I truly feel like, we in life do the first half of our life one way, probably not the way that was designed for us, but from someone else who taught us or influenced us. And then we hit 30s and we're like, man, what am I supposed to do? So you're a perfect example at 37, you kind of like saddled into your career and you're like, this is where I need to be after kids and these things. So you're speaking to the audience right now. And so why don't you elaborate a little bit about that? Like what brought you to that besides having the kid? What were the struggles that you were overcoming, or even just the fears of taking that step so late in life, and just give them encouragement to say, hey, it's not too late.
I think you harped on it. A lot of it's fear-based, and you go, well, how could you be fear-based? You're in a ring with somebody punching you in the head. What fear is a big one for you? Well, different things make you fearful, right? And I'm not sure if it was all about fear. I think some of it was just it sounds funny to say, but I was having such a good time. I wasn't thinking about what's next. I was enjoying what I was doing at the time. I had some fun careers and I was having fun. I mean, grew up in Florida and I came out to California. So it wasn't until I had a child where I was forced to think about the future. And maybe that was the biggest driver more than anything else. But
Yeah.
I can tell you, I was a sick kid. I came out 10-3 and I was sick all the time. So I was one of those kids where they yanked my tonsils because that's what they thought was the issue. He's always sick. So let's pull out his tonsils. And then what fascinated me initially was, my mom used to, I always say, poor mom has to hear this all the time. Mom used to feed us wheat germ pancakes, right? We were like, oh my God, really? And all this stuff that kids hated. And I come to find out, obviously later in life, she cared about us and she was way ahead of her time, but she had a book about nutrition. And I remember reading the book, Adele Davis's book, and thinking, my God, this is insane how you can help your life and be better for it with just the food you eat.
Yeah.
So I was attracted early in life to the whole idea, and it didn't come full circle until much later when I had to make this type of decision. And then, I broke my neck when I was in my early 20s. I got a shot with the Chiefs through an employer of mine, Carl Young, who used to was Nixon's bodyguard when he was in town to keep us game. And he also, I guess, moonlit along with Bobby Bethard and those guys as a scout. So,
Okay.
I mean, I look at you and tell. I mean, I don't have to know I don't have to hear your answer, but that was every guy's dream. You're going to give me a shot at pro ball. I'm
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, hey, you put on 10 pounds, I'll get you in a nose guard in spring camp. And of course, I tried to put it on overnight, broke my neck. Yeah, that held me back. But the thing was, I had all these guys telling me, I probably saw at the time I was playing also water polo for the national team. And I had these guys saying, hey man, you're going to be in a wheelchair by the time you're 40. You can swim, maybe, or swim at best, but you're going to be able to walk and swim maybe. And I'm thinking, well, 6 months later, again, not to impress you, but to impress upon you, I'm underneath, 365 for 10, 12 reps
I
going,
read that.
these
Yep.
doctors don't know what the heck they're talking about. And of course, 10 of them said all that. And then one of them told me, no, it's the nerve's like a garden hose. The more water you push through it, the more you use it, the more you're going to straighten out the kink in the hose. Glenn Morrison was his name. And I remember thinking, oh, that's the guy that's right, the
Yeah.
11th guy. And it worked, again, stubbornness working for you. And I had various things happen along the way. I didn't get it fixed. I'd have people come up and slap me on the back and literally drop me to the floor. One of the reasons not one of the reasons I got into fighting in Argentina. There was a dojo across from the gym, and I can remember hitting the bag. And one time I bent the wrong way, and it dropped me to my knees. I can remember thinking, this must be hilarious for the guys in the gym, getting beat up by a bag.
Yeah.
That's how, quote unquote bad it was, but still manageable. And I ended up fighting down there, and I didn't, well, arguably I didn't permanently damage myself from any of the fighting. It was from just the accumulation of constant injury to the spine over 33 years without having it repaired. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I mean, I had a lot of setbacks. I was in a coma as a result of some of the contrast they injected in my spine prior to one of the surgeries. One of them was extensive, where we were 8 levels, and it was a 9-hour surgery. It wasn't the contrast, it was bacterial contamination. So yeah, I almost missed out on the rest of my career. That's a 50-50 shot when you get bacterial meningitis. So I spent some time in ICU in a coma.
Yeah. Yeah, let me try to help point this, because that's the stuff I'm looking for, is just like, that we all go through these things. You said you're living in your car, you were doing this and doing that, and we experience life sometimes one way, and then we wisen up with a little bit of wisdom, with a little bit of a push in the right direction. Maybe if you believe in God, or something opens up that gives you an opportunity that said, maybe that's what I was supposed to do, because I had to learn this entire time for that. So you brought up a couple different things in there for sure. Did medicine come out, in your studies in regenerative side, come out after all the injuries that you've taken place, and you said, well, if they can't heal me, I'm going to heal me? Did any of that ever come up? Like, talk to me about that,
Oh yeah.
segue.
No, and I put this in the book too, so that people understood where I was coming from. I don't mean to like complain, but I had a reason to. From one experience to the other. Again, I ended up in a coma in ICU. I'm like, okay, whoa. Something about this is not working. And that's part of the reason why, I earned my master in traditional Chinese medicine, because I thought there's got to be another way. Nutrition I knew was working well. I said, well, let's try acupuncture and herbs as another alternative that I know, because food works. This may be the answer. And the frustration with that was, it does work. Chinese medicine has a lot of great things about it, but it wasn't the whole enchilada. So eventually I did go to Western medical school. The challenges, I have to say, I mean, some of the best times in my life, I know this sounds cliche, but I'm telling you, I can remember 3 blocks from where I am now, okay, in my office here, I lived in what used to be Marine Corps officers' barracks, okay, basically one-room places, which I could finally afford after I was in the car. And some of the best times ever. I had a little hibachi grill. I can remember sitting out there going, man, so again, I used to, because you're athletic, use the analogy. Yeah, this is a tough workout, man, but I'm so glad I'm in the thick of it. I'm there, firing up some hot dogs and some baked beans, which is all I could afford at the time. But I say that like, man, no, I like hot dogs and baked beans, man. It was great. I'm out in the California sun at 2:00. I had a lot of studying to do, but I took a break, and I was with my daughter, and I'm like, man, it doesn't get any better than this in some ways, So I think part of it is attitude, and I think that's what you're trying to drive in here. And it, you can look at your circumstances, you can't ignore them. As Anthony Robbins says, I like some of the stuff he says sometimes. He said, you can be positive all you want, but if there are weeds in your garden, you got to pull the weeds. You can't just say there are no weeds in my garden. There's no weeds in my garden.
Yeah.
But you can also take an approach like, okay, I'm on it, so might as well enjoy pulling the weeds and everything else you do in the meantime, right?
Yeah, I like that. And yeah, I could relate. I was in Florida when I think we were just talking, or maybe it was someone else I was talking to right before you, the other doctor we mentioned. And I moved to Florida to open up a mortgage office after, leaving, this is way back when I was 24, when I was moved from Connecticut to Florida to open up an office to, kind of be like the GM of the whole thing. And it didn't work out. The partner I chose was just full of crap, basically. And I just didn't do enough research where I should have. Probably a big decision when you leave a whole state in a career. But I was studying on the beach as well, sitting there in South Florida there, and studying to get my Series 3 license to be a commodities broker back in the day. And I was on Wall Street. I have a whole different weird history of a resume of kind of all these different things that made me who I am today. But yeah, I'm mesmerized as I hear people's different stories, learning, reading the first part of your book and, kind of getting into your background of, kind of how much trauma that you had and how much you've overcome. And it's just great for the audience to hear that, look, we can create the excuses, and not saying that every injury is not an excuse for you not to do certain things, but you find ways around it. You have to be resourceful. I think one of the best things a human can be is resourceful. And if you can't do something, you figure out how or who can help me get there. And I think we're going to talk about today, now that there's regenerative medicine and different things, epigenetics and just different stuff that's coming up and trending and getting better. The title of this book, Cheating Death, I think it's something to consider. And I was listening to Dan Sullivan. I'm not sure if you are much on business books or professional development. Dan Sullivan's got a book out. Strategic Coach is his company. And his book was on the self-managed company. And he talked about him living to like 146 years old. He's like, that's my target, because if I just go with like, the normal, 78 years old for men to live to, I think is the current or some version of that.
Post-COVID, yes, produced, yeah.
And so like if we just go with that, it's like, life doesn't look too long at that point. It's like you're souring, what your future looks like. So if you forecast and say, well, I'm gonna have a vision to live longer, take steps naturally, from food and from different practice of medicine and things that I could do, I bet you I could live longer if I forecast my life longer than, just saying, hey, I'm gonna chalk it up to the average, right? So, I'm assuming this is your field of all you do. You're making people cheat death, right? So tell us a little bit about how that all came about for you.
Yeah, and I'm not the only one. I mean, I'm going to fudge the quote, but Ray Kurzweil, I think his is live long enough to live forever, or
I
live
wrote
long
that
enough to
down.
live long.
I wrote that down. Let me see if I wrote that down as I was listening to you earlier, and I want to bring it up as a quote. I'm glad you just said it. So it says, "Don't just live long enough. Don't live longer. Live better." And my quote was, "What does that mean to you?" So talk to me about like how you take steps to do that for somebody.
Well, isn't that what it's all about? I've never met anybody who says, "Hey, doc, give me 20 in the back end and I'll give up, the quality of life.
Mm,
I'll trade 5 quality for 20 long." No, it's always the other way around. And the beauty of this, and one of the reasons why I'm trying to, as I say, spread the word, is that you don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't have to trade. You can, and it makes sense. If you can improve your health, you're more than likely, aside from getting, hit by a truck, God forbid, some random accident, you're more likely to live longer if you're living better already. If you're more healthy,
yeah.
it makes sense. So start with the one and hopefully you'll get the other. And research shows you're going to get the other. Obviously, if you've got something which is unfortunately quite common, type 2 diabetes, odds are you're not going to live as long as someone who doesn't. Unless you take your metformin, which brings up a whole other thing about the studies in metformin, what eventually will be the TAME studies. But just and I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but one of the things that quote, since we're talking quotes, that I think of is, and this goes into more psychology than anything else, but I think you're trying to weave this in here and are weaving it in. Find a way, make one is one of my favorite expressions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it in part is applicable with the book because, yeah, it's discouraging if you don't know how to, right? But there are a lot of people that are from the same ilk. Hey, okay, yeah, but I got to make one, but how? What are the avenues? And it's discouraging. And one of the things, I was a personal trainer before there were personal trainers. Since I'm 16 years old, right? They didn't call us personal trainers. one of the things I really latched onto was my favorite clients were the ones that had all the energy in the world. They just didn't have the direction. And I'm sure you've seen those people, and you want to go over there, you know, and in no charge. I mean, just as a good Samaritan thing. Hey, man, you know, you might want to try it this way. You could injure yourself, or you get more benefits that way. The idea is, you know, I love people like that. Who doesn't, right? The guys that just want to keep going, never quit. To give them a little direction, that's all they need, and then they take it from there. That's thrilling, both for the me and you and the people delivering the information, but certainly the people that are benefiting from it. So, you know, that's the idea.
I like it, and I want to segue right into some of the things that I was going to bring up here. And so, you know, the common myths, right? So, like, as we say, okay, well, we may have ailments, or we may have problems, or we're just not where we want to be, but we're going to take active steps right now to go ahead and do something. And so now we have, you know, and you've said this, and I know this is part of probably something you will talk about, biohacking and different things. So I'm a big proponent of health first, right? Just basic general health first. There's just a number of things that we could do, and I'm going to let you spit them out, and we'll make sure that we cover them all. They could just definitely do first, and you got to have an order before. It's like, here's a perfect example. It's like, you know, you buy this shit box of a car and you put tints and rims on it. It's like, fix the damn car first. Don't put the tints, you know, don't put tints and rims on it. You know, fix the damn car. So it's the same way that I think of biohacking when I see somebody who's completely overweight, has no diet, and does all the things like cold plunging. I just made fun of the cold plungers because I'm like, you know, most people don't need a cold plunge. They need a friggin' diet. They need a workout plan and need consistency. So help us out here. Give them a little sense of what's important, and we'll get into the cool stuff after.
Yeah, I mean, the important stuff is the same important stuff. It's the anticlimactic stuff when you talk about it, but it's three basics. You got to get enough sleep, you got to get enough movement, aka exercise, and you got to get proper nutrition. Without that, as you said, it's like putting a silk hat on a pig. Ain't gonna help you. So you got to focus on that. Everything else will be compensatory at best otherwise.
That's right. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So you heard me. You heard Dr. Rand. That's it. It's do the basic stuff first. Once you got that dialed in, nutrition, you're starting to see some weight loss and you want to start upping the game. Now we want to do some certain things, right? Because like, what's next? They're going to say, oh, what supplement do you use to lose weight? Nutrition, working out, sleep, you know, those things, right? First, no. What supplement do you? No, it doesn't matter. Like I just said, in that order.
And people don't think of sleep as a way to lose fat, but it's absolutely true. And you know, one of the guys that called the research study that I like to harp on a lot is Dr. Walker, and there's one study that shows 5 nights in a row of less than the 7 to 9 hours, and everyone's different, but somewhere in there is where you are, of good quality sleep, and you can reduce your insulin sensitivity by as much as 50%. Not only that, obviously, or not so obviously for a lot, the sleep time is when I call it filling the prescription that you wrote in the gym, and for the nutrition you utilized all day long to make the muscle, which is synonymous with metabolism, I argue, which is going to drop that fat and get you in the pink where you're trying to be. So, those three are the basics. But you know, it's beyond basic. One of the things I tried to do in the book is to show that there are some pretty neat tricks about sleep, and just educating people about. And by the way, his book, Dr. Bruce writes some good books. The one I just referred to, Why We Sleep by Dr. Walker, tells you way more than just that one study about what happens while we sleep. And it sounds like your audience, if not, most people go, oh, and so it's not just what grandma passed on about, oh, this is what you should do, eat right and sleep right, and lots of colors on your plate and get your 8 hours every night. No, now you have scientific validation of grandma's words. You can see, oh wow, and you can start to connect it. Oh, simple things like, or things you would never necessarily draw a line to. I'm constipated all the time. Yeah, because you're not getting that 7 hours, you're only getting 6. And it's that last hour where your body cleans up the GI tract, and you're not getting that done. So your GI's a mess. That's what I think is, and of course I'm a nerd, and I would venture to put you in the category in a good way of, obviously you're talking about this stuff, you love it, you live it. But you could look at what's normally mundane, the sleep, the nutrition, and the exercise, but in a whole new light. We have the science behind it now, where we can look at it and appreciate it and tweak it, so it's not just, okay, my doctor or you told me I should sleep more. Okay, that's not exciting.
Yeah.
You start
Yeah.
giving some of the ways, how the watch is made, not just what time it is, and it gets a lot of people into it better
Right
and
on.
motivated.
I love it. And guys, it's unfortunately it's not sexy. We never bring up those three things and like, oh, we're gonna hit a home run. We can't market that stuff. Like we gotta have something else that's scroll stopping. But secretly on the backside, we're slipping that in there first. We're just saying, okay, well, here's basics 101. We're gonna do these things first. And don't think that you can, like he mentioned before, borrow Peter to pay Paul. If you have one of those off, it's like holes in a bucket. You're gonna be carrying around this bucket, but by the time you get to your destination, you're empty. So you do need all three, and you need to be damn consistent if you're going to see the results. But let's get through the basics. Now we're through that, and I want to say, how do you feel about like now some changing things, now adding some complexity, time restricted eating, for example? Like I like to advise a good 12 hours between meals of from a day perspective, just from a general practice, like your last meal to your first meal at the end of the day, just to give our GI tract and our body some time to recover. How do you feel about certain things like that? Like, is there anything that you profess or you put out there from a nutritional standpoint that you would say is going to give somebody more tips than the basic, hey, you got to eat better?
Well, my perspective is that one size does not fit all, and
Mhm.
so with the intermittent fasting or the timed eating thing, what I have observed in my practice, and I reserve that or qualify that by saying, hey, it's what I've seen. People that are endomorphs, maybe some, no one's one or the other, but combos, but endomezos that can afford to skip meals. I used to be, still am jealous of that body type. They do better with that, right? I still miss a meal. I lost 5 pounds of hard work over the last 9 months to put that muscle on there.
Yeah.
So the natural ectomorphs, I might not. I might do the opposite. I call it the bodybuilder diet. I will say small but frequent meals, so that you always have something to keep that muscle mass on, but you're never contributing to fat. So I mix it up, and of course, how do you mix it up? Not only by observing these things, but what are the goals?
Yeah.
What are you trying to do? Are you a desk jockey? That's probably a good idea to do some intermittent fasting. Are you pre-diabetic? One of the best ways to treat it is with intermittent fasting and even a ketogenic diet. So, I hate to give too much of a general swath of advice, but yeah, I think the take home is there's so many different ways
Yeah.
to skin this cat that we don't realize or take advantage of.
Yep, I agree with that. And I don't push one modality. It's just general practice is just trying to see where, Rand has, anything in mind because, as a doctor, he's acting like a politician right now. He can't go one way or the other, right? He's got to be general practice and he's covering his bases. So I can appreciate that. And I would say, I feel like all of the modalities essentially become tools in a toolbox, right? Maybe you need a flat head, but sometimes you need a Phillips, right? And you got to know when and how. And so someone like him, talk to me a little really quickly. I want to plug the business. Besides the book, you guys got to go to cheatingdeath.com. Make sure that you do that because you got bonuses and it's coming out on the 7th or 3rd. Which one is 7th, right? Where is it? Is that right, Doc? 7th. Yep. On the 7th is coming out. So guys got to get there and especially order this week. If you hear this thing, we're going to get it up pretty quickly for him. We'll launch it on the 7th so we can, help push the needle for him a little bit. But he got some cool bonuses. So with that being said, let's talk really quickly about, what services that you offer or what people can come to you for. Like, let them know just besides who you are now as a person, what services and different things. Cause I know that you mentioned you were with, the Mind Pump Boys for a little bit, but you have like a whole couple different practices. So like, what might they be able to, knock on your door and get from you?
Well, in general, what we're trying to do is optimize health, right? One of the beauties of what I do, why I like it so much, is I don't see sick people. Really, I take it to heart. I'll be the first one to admit it. It's hard for me to deal with really sick people. You can hit me in the head with a ring post. I'll keep coming. As you can tell probably by my nose, it's not theoretical. But seeing people suffer is not my strength. I don't think it's anybody's strength, but you know what I mean. I don't deal with that well, so I get to optimize health, and all the tools, like you say, and that's what it is. It's and not to play with semantics, but it not being a political. I don't mean it to be a political answer. It just really is. It's one of those where I think it's hard to nail down one particular thing because there are so many tools.
Yeah.
But we do here is everything from hormone replacement therapy to use of peptides, use of IV nutrition, exercise counsel, you'll hear me say it. I mean, it used to be the first thing out of my mouth. Everything I can do for you is here when you come to my office versus exercise, which is right here. I call it the great equalizer.
Mhm.
But hyperbaric oxygen, I recommend in the right circumstances. Stem cells, PRP, again, regenerative and sports medicine, they kind of come together because there's unfortunately a lot of injuries in sport. We hope that we'll use a lot more proactive tools in sport and regenerative medicine, so that those tools are used ahead of the game rather than afterwards. Hot and cold therapy. I mean, there's a lot of things that will counsel you on that you could do on your own, so to speak. As you said, it's not, well, yeah. Is it going to help you? I would argue, as I said earlier, it's going to be more compensatory to take those cold plunges if you don't have everything else in place too. But there's no reason why you can't use them as long as you're on track. And if you want to shotgun them, God bless you. You won't get the scientific feedback you may or may not be looking for, but we know you're going to get to the cheese faster if you're doing as much as you can to improve or optimize your health.
Yeah.
So, there's other tricks. I mean, there's drugs I haven't mentioned. I'm a big fan of rapamycin. I think there's plenty of evidence so far, although it's not to the extent we'd like to call it gold standard. Yes, sir, it works for sure, but the theory makes absolute sense. And whether it's rapamycin itself or what we call the rapalogs, there's a lot of supplements you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of supplements that can help us, tweak the process of those basics. Just get you to that 78. That's just getting you to the basics, the average, if it were. I've never met anybody comes into my office wanting to be average. Hey, I came because I want to be average.
Thank you. I love that answer right there.
Yeah, let's get optimized.
All right, so let's get into the good stuff now. And I said the 4 pillars of this podcast are faith, fitness, fellowship, and finances. So I'm gonna jump 2 right now, but then we're gonna finish. We're gonna make everybody wait for the good stuff. So faith. Are you a man of faith? Is that something that's on your heart or something that you practice? Love to get that from you.
That's a hard one. I've been told by psychiatrists that I'm very spiritual, whatever that means.
Okay.
Faith, if you mean an organized religion, unfortunately, I look at it similarly to organized medicine, as it were. The business of medicine. I don't like paint by numbers anything really. I think you got to engage your noodle, and so I tend to resist somebody telling me that this is the one way to do things. If I know there's several other ways to do it, but the idea behind religion and faith, I absolutely subscribe to, for whatever reasons. Maybe it's all whatever you want to call it, self-serving, but I think it's not necessarily, if you believe there's eternity, great. If not, what about right now? I mean, I think doing the right thing, in other words, if you call this faith or spirituality or whatever you want to call it, I'm trying to help define what I'm saying.
It's all good.
It is. It serves you in the present. I mean, yes, there are people, and I had a unfortunate incident with someone who's not a good guy and known for it, a former mobster and all that kind of stuff. And I was trying to get my head around, like, how does this guy sleep? And the lawyer says, "Hey, stop. You can't think that way. This person doesn't think like that. He's not worried about disability and how he's going to handle his 3 kids and a wife and stuff if he were disabled. You're going to spend all night thinking about this and you're wasting your time." So there are those people that aren't that way. But I think most of us, there's benefit to doing the right thing, just being here and being able to literally sleep at night, and the benefits that whether you want, I don't want to look at it Machiavellian, like, well, I'm doing all the right things because of what it does for me. But let's talk about that. It's not just because somebody's going to do something in return for you. It's because we're humans. And this is definitely getting to my belief. I'm getting way off, but maybe it's interesting to you or not. But I think that's the way we're designed, to do the good thing, and it is beneficial not just to yourself, but to everyone else around, and it just makes for a whole collective that's better. Sorry if that sounds woo-woo, but that's my idea of faith.
It's all good, and I appreciate it. I know I like to put people on the spot a little bit. Not everyone is comfortable talking about that or politics or anything, and I will literally talk about it all, just because I feel like open dialogue and having conversation is what's needed right now. But you also, just open up the fact that, there's a lot of different ways to go about life. Some people have faith and some people don't completely, but I think the one thing that you're mentioning is having a lot of internal profit from the way you can make somebody feel, or project your gifts onto somebody, which is another good thing that you can do. And I think that's truly what we should find, is that purpose, is that benefit to living life daily and living with some kind of fulfillment or internal profit, if you will. So it doesn't always have to return a cash value to you, but you should feel like I'm doing something good with my life. And like I said, I generally speak on a lot on the mindset and health side of coaching, but appreciate that answer. Second question for you, man, is, and I don't know if you want to respond to anything I just said. I saw you move there, but I'll take finances for 500 right now. We'll say if this was Jeopardy, how are we going to profit off of regenerative medicine in the future? Talk to me about like what's coming, what's down the pipe that we don't know about, and then we'll get into all the the modalities of like kind of like what we do, because I do have some questions there. So how are we profiting on the future? Because there's a lot of people that say regenerative medicine is the next big thing.
Well, the basics would be, well, starting with, there's a lot that we don't know. And so there may be even more upside than we even realize at this point. But I think it all starts with the fact that we have people alive today that aren't concerned about where their next meal is coming from. They know that they're going to be fed today and tomorrow, most likely. They have a roof over their head and they enjoy the quality of life they have. And they're thinking about, well, might be nice to stick around for a while. And hey, not only that, I have some resources here beyond just food and shelter. And I could go the normal natural route, which I'm smiling already because I say this a lot to get people's attention. It's normal and natural, get sick and die one day. So who cares about normal and natural? If I can manipulate it so that I can do better and last longer, why not? And I think that's what you're seeing is a wave of, because of where we are in civilization, not to get into politics too much, but there's a lot of whining going on. But we're all of us way better than we were as a whole.
Yep.
There are pockets where it's not so nice, but even so, it's way better than 100 years ago.
Yep.
And I think people now have the desire as well as the wherewithal to take it to the next level, as they say. And there are a lot of options. I mean, what's pretty cool to me, I think, is when you start to combine some of these things, and that's been a problem for a long time. You talk about finances. To get financed by the NIH is very competitive, and so this researcher over here, this guy with a great knowledge base, guy or gal. Okay, I'm from the South, so when I say guy, I mean both. And this other one over here, they're not communicating. And so we're losing that synergy that takes you there because they're fighting for the dollars. I think that's going to start changing. I know it is, because guys like, the Milken Foundation is combined with UCLA and Dr. Michelson, and they've got a $2.5 billion operation now where they're building it to supplement what the NIH does. And they're saying, hey, we want you to go out, not mainstream, and study, for example, plaques in the brain for Alzheimer's. Everyone's doing that. And that's the way you're guaranteed to get funding, because that's what people think. No, we want you to go out on a limb, and here's the money to do it. And we want you guys to all come together under one roof and share the info. That's where the future is. And that's where I think, getting to part of the point here, you can start incorporating artificial intelligence, and you start blending that, and you take at a human level this combination and synergy, and then you ramp that up way more than even logarithmically with artificial intelligence, still got it and evaluated by humans. And then you take stem cell technology and say, well, we're not going to test on pigs anymore. It's close. And we're not going to test on mice, which is almost getting more and more ridiculous when you look at what that really is about. You got these fat mice that are got diabetic to begin with. But that's a whole other story. But so you can start, you can build livers in a petri dish, and you can start using AI to determine different peptides, for example, different drugs that might do the trick, and you get answers so much more quickly. And we advance medicine that much more quickly. That's where we're going with this. Now, the financial part of it, you've got people that are, philanthropists like the ones I mentioned, Milken and Michelson and some others, and, the universities. And I think, honestly, when we talk about finances, that's where it's going to come from in the future. Private financing is going to be the future of regenerative medicine. It just has to happen that way. The other is going to be way too slow. We have too many advances that we're just going to sit on otherwise. How people are going to make money at that, I don't know. I think it's going to be, as usual, the latest and greatest and rare are going to cost a lot. We've seen gene editing come from when I first when I first mapped or had my genes mapped, it cost me and my wife each $10,000. Now you can get it done for under $1,000. That's phenomenal. Okay. DNA methylation. I remember it cost to get one spot in the tray for DNA methylation cost $10,000. Now you can get way more than what you could back then, which is basically the Horvath method, which only had I don't remember, it was like 100,000 CPG spots, and now there's a company, True Age, that you can get up to. I think they're about to come out with. They've got about 900,000 now. It's about to be 1.5 million spots of DNA methylation for maybe $400 or $500. I mean, that's phenomenal. So that's where we're going. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here. I don't mean to.
No,
I'm just giving you a picture from what I see.
You're popping off things that I have on my list to ask you. You mentioned a couple different things there, and getting into those, which is good. Gary Brecka, you familiar with him? Do you know Gary? He's in Cardone's network.
I probably know of him, but I just don't recall the name. I've never been good with that. Sorry.
So he talked in one of his quotes is the presence of oxygen is absence of disease, and he talks about the oxygen therapy that you're talking about a little bit there in different things, and I know they have their own health systems that they use, and a lot of the stuff they talk about, they can like pinpoint to the month when you're going to die. When you're talking about your testings and the different things you're doing, what are you looking for? What's the benefit of someone doing that? Like, talk to us a little bit, give us the answers. Like, why would we want to do the genetic testing? Why would we want to do the DNA methylation?
Well, I suspect this is a loaded question that you already know the answer for sure. I know you know, but to me, the value is, I think to everyone, the value is not so much the accuracy of the testing. That'd be great. And the DNA methylation is arguably the most accurate to within 6 months. Telomere length is advancing that way when we're talking about, at the end of the day, we're trying to determine our biological age. But accurate or not, the precision is arguably more important because what? It gives people a gauge. Okay, here's a starting point. I'm 60. This test says I'm 65, let's say. Man, I'm motivated now, right? Okay, this is not good. I need to reverse that. I start to implement changes that I know or I believe we know are going to help reverse my age, my biological age. And then I can test again. And as long as the testing is precise enough, I see, oh, now I'm at 62. Hey, moving in the right direction. I am so motivated now, right? And I've got great feedback. Hey, this does work. I stopped smoking. Look what happens. It's not just a bunch of talk about people who are, just don't like the smell of smoke and they're trying to convince me with other reasons. No, it's because it really does have an effect on your health. So I know where I was going with that, but yeah. I think that's the most advantageous is with those tests, you have a measure. You're not just trusting someone like you or like me who read a study, or maybe you read it, does it work? I don't know. You got some feedback.
The same way we do when get an MRI when we know what the result's going to be, right? Often we get an MRI sometimes and it's like, we know this is just going to be inflammation. We're just being a baby, but we want to clear ourselves. So if I do this thing, I'm not going to break myself in half and I got something splintered, right? It's one of those where we know better, but sometimes we just like hearing the answers because it gives us a little peace of mind. There's a lot to the mental side, right?
Absolutely. It's all, well, not all, but arguably most of the things come down to the mental aspect. If you're talking about my perspective anyway, I think it's, most of it's from mental side.
Cool. All right, let's jump into some fun stuff. So give us a couple of things on the book. Let's get into that, and then I'm gonna ask some pointed questions around hormone therapy and different things. I've heard you talk prior to even the Mind Pump guys. I've heard you out there, and you're very forthcoming with the information. Doesn't really hide anything, so we could talk in and out of anything you guys want. I did have some questions that came up on social when I told them I was coming on the show, so we'll get into those. But as far as the book goes, what should they expect from it? Because I want to just continue to keep this top of mind. As we're talking, they got to go to action and go to cheatingdeath.com to get their book and their bonuses. So what's the book? What's the premise? What are they going to get out of it? What's the outcome you want them to have when you created it?
Information to take control of your health and to help start optimizing it, to start getting to the goal of improving health span. Bottom line, actionable items as well. I mean, I go into, what some of the current pricing of peptides are, as well as, current ideas of what the proper dosing is.
Yeah.
Things that, hey, my cryotherapy machine costs over $250,000. That's something that most people aren't going to, incorporate into their homes. But you don't have to have that.
That's right.
Great if you have one nearby. But if you got $150, which is what I think I spent for my ice maker, and I got it from my Amazon Prime account in one day, no charge for shipping, then you can crank out 60 pounds of ice overnight and get, in the tub for 5 minutes and have the same effect.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of do-it-yourself information in there too that, again, part of it is, okay, yeah, I hear this and I hear that. Does it really work? Yeah. What I'm trying to do in the book also is convince people that it's not just legend, or separate the legend, okay, and the myth from the science. Yes, there is good science behind it. So this is worth investing in. And here's how you do it.
I love it. You just said something right there that I want to now segue right into with the hormone side of things. You mentioned earlier when we talked, and I don't want to interrupt you, but you mentioned, do we always want to be average? No, we never want to be average. Well, I think there are some people that are like comfortable in the average. I think if you look at, and I heard it spoken this way before, and you're going to use this after I say it, unless you've already heard this, but like the heartbeat, if we want to be average, what happens if we're an average heartbeat? We're flatlined, right? It's up, down, up, down, up, down. So the average, we're a flatline. So we don't want to be average. Life has peaks and valleys, right? So
that's funny. Yeah.
But that's the way we got to live. There's peaks and valleys, and we got to adjust to it, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So hormones now. So let's talk about, like, if we were aging and trying to get the testosterone of a male in their, let's just say 50s, middle age here, 50s, and you gave him a chart first. Let's start with here, because I want to bring this up. I I did an episode on this once with another nurse practitioner, I believe. Sculpted was the company, and we talk about where should somebody who wants to perform at a high level, feel good about themselves, where should they probably target the testosterone range for their body? Should they follow the trend, which is probably average and overweight people out of shape, or should we think about where we were when our 20s and 30s and kind of target something that's more foundational, or where we felt our best, not aging ourselves with the 50-year-old crowd, but saying, why don't I target where I was when I was 20 and try to replicate that? So what's your take on that, as far as like, looking at different ways to, match yourself as people age, and trying to say, well, that's the average crowd, how can I be above average, and things of that nature? Did I make that clear?
Not sure if it's a trick question or not, because you answered the question. I mean, maybe there are some people, if there's some people that want to be average, I think it's probably based on fear. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to, if they could get rid of the fear, and obviously that's outweighing their idea of the benefits they're going to get from being exceptionally well, not exceptionally bad, but of course you want to approximate what you had in your 20s, or maybe even better if your 20s weren't that great. And that's the answer. Like, at what level of testosterone? The level at which you feel optimized. There is no one level. And but you definitely want to look into this sort of thing, because as you said, if you took an average 50-year-old male or female, by definition, it would be highly improbable that they had levels at which they could say then, hey, yeah, I feel like I did when I was 20. Now, unfortunately, that kind of begs the question, well, is it like the old Saturday Night Live skit where, shimmer, it's a floor wax, no, it's a dessert topping? I'm not suggesting that hormones are the end all be all to your health and well-being at 50. We already talked about a whole slew of other things that are important.
Yep.
But I would argue that without it, you're definitely not going to get to the optimum. Just like if you have sleep apnea, you're not going to be optimized. You could have the best hormone replacement regimen that suits you, but if you're leaving out, you don't want them. I don't want to say you're only as strong as your weakest link, but you will not be the best you can be. And hormones is just one player in that, but it's a major player.
Yeah, I love that. And I kind of answered with the question. Sorry to leave a lot of meat on the bone for you on that one.
I think it's obvious, right? Yeah, I mean, who wants
but it's
to
not
be fat
obvious. It's obvious to you and I. It's not obvious to them, right?
Well,
because
fair enough.
I'll tell you why. I have these clients, and I try to send them to somebody who knows better, and I love to talk to your company, and I did. I think I'm going to have a meeting with one of your people in your organization about possibly referring some business. But when people get their hormones tested and they're within range for their age group, what happens to the normal doctor? You're good. Here's a gold sticker. See you later. and it could be like, 350 to 900 is the range for them at this time. I don't know if that's the accurate range for, and that obviously varies for each person, but let's just say they're at 351. The doctor's like, all right, my job's done here. He's in the brackets. That's terrible. That's terrible. That's like the lowest end of the range, and it's not good at all. So elaborate on that. Like, when people are looking at their labs or getting their information back from like their typical doctors, not somebody who's a little bit more progressive, but their typical doctors, talk to me about the difference between someone like you who's going to optimize health versus someone who's going to just keep you from not dying.
You broached two topics there. One is the reference interval and this whole idea, like I talked about earlier, about normal being acceptable. It's normal to get sick and die one day. So let's throw that out. And then, Morgenthaler, the Harvard associate, I think he's associate professor or whatever he is, associate with Harvard, but more importantly, he's been a leader in the field in terms of testosterone replacement therapy. He wrote a book, Testosterone for Life. He was involved in that international consensus back in 2015 that was published in the Mayo Clinical Proceedings in 2016. It has 9 resolutions, one of which is throw out the idea of a level. I've been saying this for years. I know you feel the same way. Most good physicians, I would argue, say the same thing. You don't treat numbers, you treat people. Most of the time, that's what it's about. You treat the people, and you use the numbers to help solve the mystery why they don't feel as good or act as, function as well as they could. And so drawing the line, it used to be, Morgenthaler earlier in his career would say anything, I believe I'm getting this right, anything less than 450 was considered a hypogonadal. We're talking about men now. We're talking about total testosterone levels in nanograms per deciliter. And then finally, with this international consensus, which included another 20 experts around the world, weighing in too, hey, look at the patient. Does the patient have signs and symptoms of hypogonadism? That's what you treat. Now, the other part of this, though, is that when you're on testosterone replacement therapy, unlike other hormones like thyroid hormone, where you can approximate levels that are going to be ideal and optimized based upon the reference intervals of so-called normal. And again, you go back to where are they getting the reference intervals for normal? The reference intervals they use for thyroid are what are both normal and optimized. When it drops below that, oh yeah, you're a mess. We got to fix that. Yeah. With testosterone, you have this really low thing, and you go, okay, it's normal, but it sucks. Yeah. Pardon my French. Somehow it's acceptable. So, but anyway, beyond that, though, what we found, and we've seen this in studies that go back as far as the 1950s, in order for the patient to enjoy the resolution of symptoms of hypogonadism, male or female, you have to use way more than you would suspect and outside that reference interval. And that's why there's still some doubt out there amongst some patients and primary care physicians that TRT is even viable or worth pursuing because, okay, well, let's get this patient back into the normal range. It might be, let's get him over that 350 and get him to 400. Okay, no. And so they experience failure because they're not experiencing, any resolution of symptoms, obviously, and it's not true TRT as I see it. And I'm not the only one. If you go out there and look at the leaders in the field, like Morgenthaler, like Lipschultz, like Shippen, who was writing books about this back in the, 1982, I think it was Eugene Shippen was writing about this, right? And you go further back, you can look at Jonathan Wright, you can look at John Duke, real pioneers before. You realize that, again, back in the 1950s, they realized for men, I would say if you took that top of the reference interval, which I think LabCorp's dropped it now from somewhere in the 1100s, I think it used to be like 1127. Now it's like 929. If you multiply that times 1.6, that is the minimum total testosterone you want to see. Because if you don't hit that target, okay, you fall out of therapeutic range and you won't get the maximum resolution of symptoms, okay? Now, it's not a double the dose and hope for most situations because you go beyond that, about, there are only so many androgen receptors. So adding more in the, and not to be anything but just observing, in what I would call in the bodybuilder vein, the competitive idea that you can, hey, more is better. It's not going to work.
That, by the way.
Well,
I was in that field too. I'm an ex-pro. Just I'm not sure if you knew that, so I'm very familiar.
No, I didn't.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you found out the hard way that then I'm sure that then you're fighting, the management of some of the metabolites of these things And even if you didn't have metabolites, so like with a DHT derivative, and you were worried about excess estrogen, it was still okay. But I can't sleep now, and I'm not getting any bigger out of it. So why am I doing that much oxandrolone or that much donazolol? It's just totally side topic. But inside the gym and inside sport, there's a lot of crazy physiologic explanations for things that you just go, oh my God, you totally slept through physiology class in high school and in college. But it is a testing ground, because if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, they'll let you know right away. Now this is baloney, right?
Yeah.
But getting back to the levels, what's particularly interesting to me too is the same thing works for females, where at the top of the reference interval, anyway, and it might just be a factor of the reference interval itself. But if you took the top of the reference interval for females, it's about 50, 52 in the LapCore test, let's say, you're going to multiply that times 3, not 1.6, to get to therapeutic, therapeutic minimum, below which you don't want to fall. I would argue to a certain point, it gets linear once you hit that. But until you get there, it's not linear. You're not even getting results. You're just going, oh, okay, what am I expecting here? Maybe I feel a little better. And of course, here's the thing. If you haven't opened the door to the next room yet, you don't know what to expect. And anything sometimes is better than nothing. This was what was the result of the androgels, where someone was getting benefit. Every day they did it for 6 weeks, and it finally kicked in, but they were getting benefit for 3, 4, maybe 6, 8 hours. And they go, oh boy, well, it was better than I had. But they have no idea how much better it is when you have a consistently high therapeutic level. I'll stop there. I know I keep going on a tangent, but yeah, is that
Yeah.
a good start answer?
Yeah, it does. It paints the picture that there's not one size fits all, and it paints the picture that obviously you don't want to be on the lower side of the range. And I want to bring up something that's you brought up in one of your episodes, and something that I learned on that episode, that estrogen, and obviously we know when you're playing with hormones, estrogen is going to usually be affected as well, and you have to manage that. Most people just think when you see the effects of testosterone, they're going to say roid rage and all these other things, and it's going to affect you. But you mentioned in your episode that the estrogen is actually the emotional trigger. It's the one that, if high, if it's elevated, actually gives you that puffiness, the red, and all that. And it's the one that truly makes you, probably more of what you are. I think you said it a couple different ways, and I'm gonna let you take this one, but jump into that, because I think there's a big misconception about having testosterone and roid raging and doing all the rest of the things. And I think you mentioned it was like the feel good hormone versus the estrogen, which is the one that
Yeah.
bring you up.
Well, let's start with that. Testosterone's been known as natural antidepressants going back again to the 1950s. I remember one study where they used a fairly good sized cohort, probably at least, again, 50 females. And this is back in the 50s when, testosterone is a guy hormone, right? So it was an interesting study they undertook. But they treated depression, refractory to treatment. And I should go back and look it up so I can state this accurately, but I want to say they had a success rate over 85%. And it makes sense because it is the feel good hormone. And once you reach middle age, that's when it starts to spiral downward. And think about it. I mean, by the Bible of psychiatry, the DSM-5, right? If you've got depression, it kicks in, whether it's diagnosed or not, in your late teens, early 20s. Well, why are all these people getting on Prozac at 35, 40? Yeah, stuff happens. Unfortunately, that's a lot of time, the period where our parents might die, or you get divorced or whatever, and that goes into a whole other thing. Why'd you get divorced? But that's when your testosterone drops off. And serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are typically used, first line, yeah, they can help you get through the grief because they pull the rug out from underneath, but they also pull the rug out from everything else too, the good times. And so I often hear the same word. It puts a blanket over everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's not good long term. Boy, sorry, I'm going off on too many tangents here. But there are some anabolic steroids that do have a profile attached to them that would include aggression. Halotestin, trenbolone, arguably too, anadrol, but not because of, we think it's because it acts on an estrogen receptor or something like that. And so we go back to estrogen being the cause of the irascibility, the moodiness, the water retention, and any female, okay, and I mentioned females because they have naturally big swings in estrogen. Will attest to that. Yeah, this time of the month I'm getting full of water, bloated, and there's PMS, there's PMD. It's not a good thing. I don't have that, thank goodness, because I don't have the body parts. But and thank God my wife has the body parts, but not those symptoms. But I see a lot of it, and I know I'm ringing a bell for a lot of females out there. Guys who are not built that way, the parts aren't there, and we're not built for big swings in estrogen. It can be a disaster, and it does turn Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. Unlike testosterone, that yes, if you are someone who's kind of a jerk to begin with, I always use the word leverage with testosterone. It'll give you more energy to be a jerk, sure, but it's not going to make you one. And I think is that the point you saw me make at one point?
Yes, yes,
I've seen that
100%
throughout my career.
Good deal. And I don't know how much time you have, but I'm be respectful of that. So I'm gonna leave with, not leave, but I want to ask a question this way, and I'm gonna take one from the crowd too. So if we're replacing or adding supplement, right? Somewhere you supplement, the definition would be somewhere where it's lacking, and you're basically replacing something that's lacking in your body or wherever. If we're supplementing with hormones, and I'd love to get into peptides. I don't know much about them at all. I could be honest with that one. I'd love to hear a little bit take on that. But if we're supplementing now, are we then turning off those those not receptors, but I mean even like the let's just say testosterone, for example, right? Like if you start replacing your testosterone with something synthetic, if you will, although it's replacing an actual true source of testosterone, you'll shut off your own ability to produce. People would say that's a bad thing, and then many other different ways. So bring that up, because the second half of that question is going to be the one about fertility. So talk to me a little bit about the myths with that, or even just the risks with that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I giggle because number one, if you're on TRT, the presumption is that your natural production is not sufficient anyway. So who cares if you lose your natural production? What are you losing after all? And I say that half jokingly, but have to get you considered. Who cares if you did? Now, that said, before you turn it off, meaning the show, it's that's it, I'm not doing it. No, it doesn't work that way. It does temporarily, but think of how a female, for example, uses oral birth control, okay, using estrogen and progesterone or their derivatives. She will jigger her hormones. So, by the way, including testosterone, which is kind of funny because, as a quick aside, I'll be quick about it. You use birth control to make sure you don't get pregnant while you're enjoying, sexual activity, and yet it buries your testosterone, so you're not enjoying sexual activity that much anymore, which is kind of funny. I'm not a big fan of oral birth control, but my point is that if she decides to stop and get pregnant, what happens? Sometimes within a month, her hormones re-equilibrate.
Yeah.
For a guy, I think in the example you're using, if he's stymied his production of that 351 nanograms per deciliter, and he stays on testosterone, let's just call it replacement for a year, and for whatever reason he gets off at age 51, for whatever reason, well, he's not going to go back to that 351 necessarily, because a year has passed and it's only going the wrong direction. Let's call it 325. He'll come back there, okay, or whatever it would have been had he done nothing, okay? Now, how quickly he does that, returning to baseline for his age, is a factor of chronicity of use. If you're on for 20 years, it's not going to happen in a month. It's probably going to happen in 9 months. And your age. If you go on and off when you're 35 to 36, it's going to be different than 65 to 66. So those points should be made. But yeah, the Leydig cells where testosterone is being made are not going to be getting a signal from the pituitary, so they're going to essentially senesce. They're going to take a nap until you wake them up again. They're still there.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned fertility. Well, this is pretty cool too, because people talk about HMG, or follicle stimulating hormone itself, or analogs to improve fertility. You don't need those necessarily. I've never seen someone who actually needed them, and even if they did, I never saw it work. As long as you have a local prime to the Sertoli cells, which you're trying to stimulate, those are the ones that are creating the sperm. You need that intertesticular testosterone from the Leydig cell. You'll maintain or improve or return your fertility. It's not something lost. Again, boy, you talk about evolution and the way we're pre-programmed. We are made to procreate. So yeah, you might. And by the way, I say this quickly. Do not think just because you're on testosterone that you're shooting blanks.
Yeah.
I usually repeat that to patients. Okay, do not use it as a contraceptive tool. but you will certainly reduce your fertility. And some people will actually lose it. That's a matter of genetics and, again, chronicity of use, age, et cetera, et cetera. But knock on wood, I have not ever seen someone who had it lose it and not be able to regain it for physiological reasons. Back in the day when people thought you had to stop using TRT, I've seen guys give up because they were so miserable. Okay. Yeah. But nowadays, thanks to guys like Dr. Lipschultz out of Baylor University, I think they call him Dr. Sperminator or something like that. They developed tools where, well, in the tool, what's the tool? There was this legend. I don't know if you recall, because you say back in the day you were into this sort of thing. Obviously, the post, what do they call it, post PTT, post cycle, no, PCT, post cycle therapy involved HCG, right?
Yeah.
But don't use more than 500 units a day because you'll decrease the sensitivity of the Leydig cells. I'll spare you a funny story I had when I first met Dr. Lipschultz, but upshot is with 3,000 IU every other day, I've never lost that bet. You'll restore fertility while staying on TRT.
Right on. HCG or Clomid, which one would you recommend if you are trying to maintain and give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, HCG, because what HCG is, it's a homolog, meaning even closer than an analog of luteinizing hormones. So it just overrides the system 100%. It goes to Leydig cells, says, hey, wake up and do your job.
Yeah.
Enclomiphene is a different mechanism of action. And I've seen conflicting research showing that enclomiphene will work to keep or restore fertility. Because if you think about it, the way it's designed to work as a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator, it encourages the pituitary to send a signal to the Leydig cells by blocking the reception of estrogen. Well, that works when testosterone is low because they both have to be low for that signal to start. If you think about it, it's kind of a jip for us guys anyway, in the sense that, you could have low testosterone but high estrogen and your pituitary is not going to send a signal. Because estrogen is derived from testosterone, that situation can linger. So you block the reception of estrogen and then the body says, okay, coast is clear, we'll go ahead and send a signal. Well, if you're already using TRT, testosterone levels are high, how would a SERM do that? Unless there's a mechanism of which I'm not aware. And I haven't had time to do the deep dive I need to do, but there are doctors out there prescribing it. Doesn't mean it works, but there's probably another mechanism by which it does work. I hope there is, because that's a nice plan B, especially given the situation right now where the FDA has blocked compounders from making HCG, which kept the price down to something affordable. Yeah. As opposed to about 3 or 4 times what it costs now, if you can even find it. And enclomiphene is relatively cheap. Not clomiphene, by the way, enclomiphene, which is one of the isomers of clomiphene, which is much safer. Going back to that activation of the receptors, zuclomiphene, we think, has an odd effect on the receptors such that it can make you miserable, kind of like an excess of estrogen can make you miserable.
A lot of food for thought in there, guys, and just some things to think about as we were going through. And my quick story: at 30, I had low T. I'm 41, and at 30, and it was right after I turned pro as a physique guy, and naturally, I probably just crushed my whole libido and everything just from competing and all the stress that I put on my body. And I was gonna kind of talk about this as a lot of times men will go in and get tested, and there's a lot of other causes and effect, right? Low sleep, stress, anxiety, poor diet, all that's going to push down, your testosterone into these levels that are just abysmal. So, the effect of actually taking some hormones and raising a place to where you could actually function and have a little bit better opportunity to, do better for your health. Then you lose all that weight and you get better. And then you're probably actually set up internally better to actually have a higher testosterone if you ever wanted to come off of it. So you mentioned, maybe as you're aging up and testosterone should in theory go down, you might go way up just in the fact that you took away all the negatives that were actually lingering you, in the beginning. You were taking away that ball and chain that was bringing you down. So a lot of times you'll use it as an advantage, like a suit that you put on, like a coat of arms that's going to help get you to another place if you use it properly. And then there's abuse as well. So there's plenty of just some food for thought as I was kind of digesting some of the information you were talking about. So
yeah, and you're referring to secondary hypogonadism, where as a result of poor habits, your pituitary is not focused on testosterone. It's dealing with all the stress and other things you got going on. So you relieve those stressors, like being too fat, not getting enough sleep, et cetera. And your pituitary says, "Oh, okay, back to our job at hand here." and it sends a signal again to the testicles, which are again presumably still functioning because we're calling it secondary hypogonadism. At some age, though, the testicles look at you like, you're crazy, man. I'm done operating here. And then that's primary, in which case we have to use replacement.
Right on. So talk to us, I'll let you end closer to this one, but what's your favorite up and coming technology or tool that you're using right now in the the regenerative side? There's epigenetics, there's gene editing and all these things. What's the hot topic for you right now, or the place that you like to spend your time researching or providing services to?
Man, that's such a hard question.
Gotta pick
I'm
one.
sorry,
Come on.
but yeah. Well, okay. So I've been focused on stem cells for a long time and sort of the offense for a while. Now I'm focused on the measurement of success. So what's really intriguing me currently for the last few months, and I think it will take me for a few more here, is the measurement, we'll call it the measurement of biological age, the effect of these things, being able to actually prove that rapamycin is doing its job, that metformin is doing its job, not on blood sugar control, but on improving autophagy or starting it for some people. So measuring the benefits is what I'm focused on right now.
Of that. And then when you get that feedback, let's just and just run us through like a typical patient that you find out that you run a test on them, you run some analysis, and you're like, what? Yep, we can do something. What's generally the first thing that you're going to do? What's the process that you take them through?
I ask them first and foremost, what are your chief complaints? What's bugging you the most? Because they might be fat, but that's not their biggest issue. They're figuring, hey, I have no energy. And I know definitely, it all folds together into one. And you say, well, yeah, you wouldn't be, so lacking in energy if you weren't so fat and you weren't creating so much estrogen from that fat. I mean, I'm just riffing here, but there's a lot of different reasons. But my point is, you start with what bugs them the most, because for a lot of reasons, one, that's what bugs them the most. That's what they came to you for, but also to start establishing a trust and a confidence so that we can get to all the other things. That's important to focus on what they're focused on, in my opinion, and then matching the treatment with the diagnosis. So it might be, I have to say easily, and maybe it's because that's what I'm quote unquote known for, because a friend of a friend of a friend. But I deal a lot with hormones, and again, not to make it like the Shimmer product. Most of the 35-year-olds and up are in need. I mean, the age combined with stress, we just see testosterone levels plummeting. So that's an easy one to start with a lot of times. And then we take it from there, again, based upon the other complaints.
All right. So let's just say now we're prescribing testosterone to somebody who's 35 or older, 40. Let's just say me, for example, with prescribing me testosterone. I'm feeling like having ailments of lack of sex, desires, and energy might be slacking during the end of the day. Do you go full hormone panel looking for other things? I think you mentioned in one of these that you might, see prolactin or some version of that, affected, and you might be looking at, maybe we're looking at the wrong thing. Is it testosterone the problem, or is it, these other markers over here? So like, talk to me about that. And obviously it's going to be condition based, but then, okay, let's just say testosterone's in the way. How do we go about, introducing different things, peptides and those other things, if I'm trying to optimize and be my best self, not my average self?
Sure. My panels are pretty broad. And I've had patients told they have to come back another day to take the rest of the blood. So just a petite, I'm thinking of one gal, one petite older woman who just had to come back later. And it's not to do anything except try and be as comprehensive as possible, right? And we screen in advance. So to your point, like with prolactin, if someone is in that age range where we suspect it might be, let's say they're 20 years old, and you go, testosterone replacement, it's conceivable.
Yeah.
And you go, really? It's got to be secondary, and let's find out the cause. So yeah, prolactin would be added to that test because it makes sense to look into that area. If someone comes in and they're my age, you go, look, even if it's prolactin, who cares? Because, unless it's affecting you otherwise, we probably wouldn't even consider treating it. If it's prolactinoma, it's normally benign. So whatever. I shouldn't say completely, because, if you have trouble, we can reduce prolactin and improve the refractory period between ejaculations, and that's no small thing. So I throw it in there because technically we wouldn't completely ignore it. But you understand where I'm going with it, where I wouldn't throw a prolactin there. And another reason is, and I haven't been able to find the study recently, but I know I saw it. People on TRT males tend to have higher prolactin, slightly above the top of the reference interval. So it's like 16, 18, and that freaks them out. First of all, again, you're not dependent upon it anymore because you're on TRT. But because you're on TRT, it tends to elevate that slightly. It's not 64 or something that's pathological or potentially. But yeah, so you get a panel that's based upon their age and their complaints. And then, yeah, you go from there. And once you get the testosterone sussed, then again, it comes back down to, and it's amazing because I had a guy sitting in this chair over here, brought his dad in, and dad was 77 years old. He was middle-aged chiropractor, like 45. And he brought dad from Florida. And dad's day was getting up late. He'd wait until about 4:30, take a lap around the one block of the neighborhood, come in, watch the evening news. And he sat there and told me the only reason I'm still here is because I don't have the courage to kill myself. His life was miserable. Okay. Was very suspect about the whole idea of TRT. We took the labs. Duh, he's 77. What are the odds he's going to have? I mean, Guinness Book of World Records if we had any amount of T. Anyway, long story short, we got him on T, 90-day follow-up. He's throwing tight spirals to the kids on the block, and now he wants to know about all the other stuff. What else you got for me, Doc? So what's fascinating to me is to watch these people that sometimes lose a bet and come in because, okay, I got to look at my testosterone because I lost that bet or my spouse told me she's going to divorce me or something. And then once they get feeling good, they go, what else you got, Doc? And then, yeah, we talk about, well, what are you trying to do? For the masters athlete, talk about peptides. I love thymosin beta-4 because it helps with the actin fibers. And, you just need that little extra help. At 20, you don't need it. But again, I call us masters athletes. Anyone over 35 might benefit from that, either just because or because we're trying to recover from a muscular strain. There's always the proactive benefits of stem cells and what comes with the stem cells, the exosomes, the growth factors they're in, the cytokines, the messenger RNA. I think that's going to be something you're going to see that's going to take over, kind of like IV nutrition stands have. You're going to have places where people go get umbilical cord tissue because I don't know if you know, but recently the FDA lost a case out here in federal court in Central District Court in California. Dr. Berman, Mark Berman, was challenging the FDA's position that said that stem cells were a drug. And in a very well written conclusions of fact and findings of fact and conclusions of law, the judge rendered the decision saying, hey, no, we can't do that. And the FDA had 30 days to rebut and appeal. They didn't, they couldn't. And I hasten to say, I think it all came from a good place. They're trying to make sure, have these fly-by-nighters that make promises you can't keep. And you can't make any promises anyway, but they do it the right way. Anyway, I think it's going to open it up here a lot. So you'll see people getting a lot of benefit from that. So that's an option, depending upon, again, what they're complaining about. But PRP and stems are usually looked at as, okay, I got to repair something rather than what should come in the future, which is, hey, let's stay ahead of it. Of course, we still do IV nutrition. Yeah, peptides are gonna grow, and I use peptides a lot. I mean, muscle's one thing, but how about ligaments and tendons? BPP, PC157 is got a lot of anecdotal information as well as a lot of good animal studies behind it. There are other peptides.
Right. Ceremelin, is that what that one is?
It's a good growth hormone releasing hormone. It was one of the first. It was called Jaref. Dr. Walker was involved in all that. But that now we have so many that are better in that they're longer acting, and we have some that use a different mechanism of action that we can combine, like CJC 1295 with ipamorelin uses both the ghrelin pathway as well as the GH-RH pathway, and presumably get more bang for the buck. That said, outside of peptides, we have something called a peptidomimetic, which acts like a peptide. It's basically a fancy way of saying it acts like one but isn't one. But ibutamorin, also known on the boards as MK677, that one works for the ghrelin pathway. And I've seen the best results of all the growth hormone secretagogues with that one. And that one is used for not only regenerative tool as a regenerative tool in general, but not only ligaments and tendon repair, but fat loss, right? Because every fat cell has a growth hormone receptor, and when it hits, it releases the fatty acids into the bloodstream. So, and well, right? I mean, as a bodybuilder, not that you necessarily did this stuff, but I'm sure growth hormone. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of guys still think, and it can help with muscle mass. So, oh, it helps me grow muscle. Actually, most of the research shows it helps put water back in the muscle. Okay. But if you want to grow muscle, we all know anabolic steroids is definitely a way better way to do it. But growth hormone is used what? Primarily to cut up, because we know it burns away the fat, right?
Yeah.
You drop the carbs, you keep the water where it's supposed to be, and you accelerate the fat loss process with growth hormone. So yeah, those are some of the things that we get to next often. There's rapamycin, which for the people that don't necessarily have something that needs fixing, or also already on the program of long-term health span and health optimization. Rapamycin works to put the cell back in best operating condition, right? Through autophagy and recycling of the components, getting rid of the cells. Well, getting rid of the cells through a senolytic, we call it, is another process of, like, if a car is beyond retuning and it's spewing exhaust everywhere and poisoning the nearby cells as well as the cell itself, we have ways to cull the herd, as it were.
Do you
live long.
on that one? I want to bring up autophagy, for the folks that are listening. So I don't go too sciencey on this one, and so they're definitely going to be like, "Whoa, we just went to school today." But autophagy, obviously, cellular cleansing. A lot of times that happens on the backside of a fast after the 48 to 72-hour window. Now, are you saying rapamycin can get that happening sooner than actually having to withstand eating? Like, talk to me. You just mentioned that was part of the autophagy and what you're doing. Talk to me a little bit about how you're bringing that in.
So it does get kind of complicated, because what we find is that, and of course, the name is the mammalian or mechanistic target of rapamycin, mTOR, and there's a complex 1 and a complex 2. It looks like rapamycin will downregulate mTORC1. It looks like it also has a downregulatory effect on mTORC2, which we may not want. And that gets into a whole other thing of maybe combining rapamycin with maybe a growth hormone releasing secretagogue, so that we kind of compensate it. If rapamycin will downregulate mTORC1 1,000-fold, but upregulate mTORC2 200-fold, the net effect might be, I'm not saying this properly, but so it has a counter effect. Let me put it this way: counter effect on mTORC1 of say 200-fold, then the net is 800. So we still get what we want, but we don't downregulate, maybe even upregulate mTORC2. We get the best of both worlds. But this is all very theoretical still. But the idea is that mTOR complexes regulate what happens in the cell. And if we can say, hey, we're not trying to make for growth right now, okay, we're not trying to replicate cells, we're trying to do the reverse, which happens, as you said, after a certain amount of fasting, this autophagy, where I use the idea of a kitchen, right? The cell is a kitchen. It's slinging food all day long. We're cooking, we're chopping, we're doing things. And at the end of the day, every night we're going through this process of cleaning up the cell, right? We're cleaning up the dishes. Otherwise, what happens? You're cooking with dirty pots and pans. You're contaminating the food. Also, in terms of the DNA, the recipe book, right? You're spilling tomato sauce on it. You can't read. Was that actually 5 ounces I'm supposed to add, or 2 ounces, right? Or was it 2 pounds, and about all that kind of stuff? So it goes back, and this whole process of autophagy resets the cell so it's functioning properly. The DNA is where it's supposed to be, right? It's in alignment. It's got the right order. And then, of course, God, we go into the epigenetics, which is really kind of what we're focusing on here. You're recycling stuff. So if a cell, okay, is no longer useful, do we just pitch it? No, we actually, the cell dies, okay, but we can recycle the components of the cell. And that's part of the word that gets out when you start fasting, is the body realizes, hey, man, we're no longer in the let's go to office and kick butt mode. Okay, we're out of fuel, so we got to start conserving. And so it starts. So it's almost like to use the body anthropomorphologically. It's like thinking, well, we can't go out and hunt today, so let's clean up the mess at home. Let's sharpen the tools and let's recycle. Since I'm not sure when we're going to get our next meal, so we can build these cells. And so it gets rid of the old and saves what it needs to, in case, hey, yeah, there's not something coming down the line. So, fasting has tons of research behind it right now, and it's one way to do it. I would argue, though, that particularly for someone like you, certainly me, I don't like missing meals, man. And it's not just about that, but exercise, can help, get these things in motion too. I mean, I don't know if I said it earlier, but NAD is another supplement everyone talks about, NAD plus, right? What's the best way to create NAD plus, which activates the sirtuin genes that helps get this process of motion we're talking about? Exercise, best way, better than any supplement you can eat, So, sorry, I know I'm bouncing around, but I'm trying to get as much in there that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot, man. And I want to give you the last word because I want to be respectful of the time. And I know that you probably have a podcast tour behind me. I know that you just ran in from another one. And guys, I just want to again mention if you're still with us here, I know we're going and you're going to school, you're going to Dr. Rand University 101 right now, catching it all. But cheatingdeath.com is where you're going to pick up this book. He's got some cool bonuses. Doc, tell us a little bit about the bonuses that they're going to get if they buy it in the launch week here.
Well, we got a few things going on. One of the things I developed with some people way smarter than me, Andy Barninger, the math genius, put together, and it was using just, multivariate regression analysis. We built our own biological age estimate. It's called the death clock. Again, the biological age is where you really are, as opposed to chronologically where you are. We've all seen the guy that looks like he's 70, he's only 40. Yeah, he's going to die young, so to speak. So it estimates biological age using data that's available to everybody, and the NHANES database, which is huge. But then we've added other, not necessarily proprietary, but they're all in some way proprietary, and you develop your own algorithm. But you can go all the way up to using telomere length and DNA methylation. But it's free, for the basic stuff, so you can use it hopefully to motivate you, like I mentioned earlier. I also interviewed a lot of other experts in the field. I am certainly not the only one in this field that's got it going on. Not that I necessarily have it going on. I'm not the end all be all. There's so many guys and gals that are contributing in this area. So I asked around for other people's opinions, particularly where they specialize. For example, Dr. Cami, we for some reason we separate dentistry from the rest of the body. Like, okay, well, the mouth doesn't count, but the feet do. So we're going to have podiatrists, right? But that's such an essential part of health. So I interview guys like that and get their take on, how their field comes into play when it comes to optimizing health and improving health span. So that's the docu-series we're talking about. So we offer, I think it's like the first couple or 3 episodes of that. And then I've also developed what do we call it? Nutritional food. Everyone loves these bars, right? But some of these things, if you look at the basis of them, they could just as easily be called a Snickers bar, right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
And particularly, the sugars that are in there, which I'm not saying sugar's bad if you're in the middle of a bicycle race,
Mm-hmm.
and you're challenging for the top spot on the podium and all that kind of stuff. That's great. Without sugar, we'd be lost. But people are using it. Oh, it's a healthy bar. Well, we developed, there's a company, Taste and Bliss. We developed a bar like that that'll compete, I hope, with the Chewy Oat bars or wherever they are, that uses allulose, which is a functional sweetener that doesn't have all these side effects. It's not going to kill you because it creates aldehyde in the liver and all that stuff. It's actually naturally occurring, quote unquote, sugar, but it's almost, well, it works on a 1 to 1 to 5 ratio, and you can cook with it. It's got the same texture, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that might be one of the offerings that comes with it. Hope you enjoy those, and we'll make more drinks and stuff out of it, because I think there is a place for that. It's just what we've come up with so far either causes incredible GI distress, or actually spikes insulin even though there's no sugar involved, or it tastes horrible, or you can't use it, or it's got some bad side effect with other than the ones I mentioned. So I think I had all the ones that are going to be offered in along with the book.
Yeah, and we'll put this all up in the notes, guys. You don't have to catch it all. Obviously, that's what the good thing about having a podcast and wherever you're viewing this player on, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, etc. So, Rand, where can they follow you? What talk to me about the place that they can actually interact with you, or maybe it's your team, or just like the best place to get into your world if they liked what you said today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, because so I do something with Dave Borlée on a Jay Cutler channel, where people will write in and ask questions. They're typically more exercise and bodybuilder based, But on Instagram, I'm happy to field any and all questions. That's where I seem to be getting most of my questions, at least from the PR group I mentioned earlier. That's always fun. So yeah, ask away there. I think, I know we have a Facebook page, and I think some of the questions come through there, also through LinkedIn. But I think most of them come from Instagram. Wherever they come from, I'm happy to answer them. So yeah, feel
And
free.
what's that YouTube page? Because I believe that's where I saw you. I definitely saw you on someone else was asking you questions about the industry and bodybuilding and all that stuff. What's the YouTube channel?
You are going to get me beaten, man. I have no clue. That's why I hired
Oh,
these.
we'll find it. We'll find it. It's probably not that hard. We'll
Sorry.
Well, listen, man, you got the last word. Anything, because I'm gonna give you a super good intro after this thing wraps up, but there's all that. What do you want to leave the crowd with? If it's knowing what we've kind of covered, probably knowing I talk about faith, fitness, fellowship, and finances. Leave them with something. Give 'em a golden nugget.
Well, here's my contribution for the golden nugget of the day, right? Is to realize that there are a lot of things you can do to improve your health span specifically, that heretofore weren't known. And you can go online and it'll be kind of hit or miss to see if you're going to, find out about them, because you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I'm hopeful that the book will help at least start you on that journey to take control of your own health. There are a lot of things we can do to help you be the arbiter of your own health, and that's the main message. Take control. You don't have to sit there and go, oh geez, I drank and smoked half my life away. I can't tell you how many people, for example, come in and say, oh boy, if you knew what I did in college or up until I got sober, whatever, man. Okay, now's now. And even, oh God, I did so many anabolic steroids, I ruined myself. I don't know where that comes from. Anyway, I'm again. I started with a nugget. Now I'm giving you, a
I
bunch of
like it
extra
because I
stuff.
always actually do this with my guests, and it usually becomes the intro of the podcast. Usually they give me their best stuff last, and I'm like, nobody usually stays till the end, so I got to get it out of them and then give it to them in the beginning.
Well, that's
So
the way you're supposed to write any good essay, right? You start with your thesis. The opening is supposed to be kind of a summary for what you're going to talk about the rest of it. Yeah, you're right.
So all good stuff. I think we got enough stuff in there, and if the crowd gives us enough comments and feedback, I'm gonna knock on Rand's door once again and see if we can get him back on here and get some pointed questions, and maybe there's something we could do in the future. So appreciate your time today. Definitely, guys, go to cheatingdeath.com to get this book. Help this guy get his bestseller. I mean, it's such a process. I know he started a while back, and I could tell you, as somebody being around the other author that I kind of was helping out with this, it's a lot, man. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of time, energy, money, resources that go into these books. And you have a publisher, so that means that Rand didn't self-publish and make all the money from this thing. So he's sharing profits with somebody else out there. So go ahead and give him a bestseller, so the next book he wants to get, he can get a bigger signing bonus to go write it. I know how these things work, so let's hook him up.
Well, hey, since you talk about finances, if I might, and I know it's going to sound a little bit, well, whatever it sounds like, I do care, but I don't care because I want to get the point across. You don't make money on books. That was not the purpose of the book. It'd be great to recoup some of it if I can, but really, if there's a reason for getting to bestseller, it's because that means more people. I mean, do you buy the bestsellers, or you buy whatever's randomly out there? You might take a bite. You read the back page and you go, well, that sounds like it might be good, but it doesn't even get out there unless it makes the bestseller list, and that's the purpose for it.
That's right.
If it's something you're into and you like the book, certainly give it a plug, because making the bestseller list means that I'm doing what I looked at as my job when I first started doing that, which is to spread the word. So that would be the purpose of it. And again,
100%.
thank you for helping with this.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we did today was going to be a lot better than me just giving you a random social media plug and getting a free book. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I'll buy the book. I'll support him. I've watched you in the past, so I'd be happy to get the book. And I was like, let's have a conversation. So I'm glad that you took us up on that. And we'll do this thing again at some point. Appreciate you.
Yeah, please. No, I'd love to. And I right back at you. Thank you.
Oh, I'll hit the pause so I could do my intro. Where did it go? Yeah, man, I appreciate the conversation, and there's definitely a lot of stuff, and I was trying to keep it as I try not to script out anything. I don't really like. All right, Battle Plan, Capurso here, your host of the My Battle Plan podcast, and we have a great guest today, Dr. Rand McClain. He's got a book that's coming out, Cheating Death. I got to give him a plug, man. This thing's we just kind of sat and ripped for about an hour and a half. So hopefully you got a little time, get a coffee, sit back and relax because this thing's going to be pretty good. Take some notes though. He drops a lot of lines. He does a little bit more science than we usually do on this podcast, but we'll make sure that we stack the notes inside of wherever you're watching this, whether it's a YouTube or if it's on one of the podcast players. We'll make sure the show notes are loaded for you. But without further ado, let's get into this episode with Dr. Rand McClain, and we're going to be cheating death today.